The summer air was crisp, filled with the symphony of crickets and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Emily, a curious 12-year-old with freckles and a wild imagination, was chasing fireflies in the backyard of her rural Kansas home. She had her mother's flashlight in one hand and a jar in the other, giggling every time a flickering glow evaded her grasp. The countryside stretched endlessly around her, a patchwork of fields and distant woods illuminated by the faint light of a crescent moon. Suddenly, the air grew still. The wind stopped, the crickets went silent, and the fireflies vanished into the darkness. Emily froze, her heart pounding in the sudden quiet. Then, a low hum filled the night, growing louder and more resonant. She looked up, expecting to see a plane or maybe a helicopter, but what she saw was unlike anything her young mind could comprehend. A massive, disc-shaped craft hovered silently above the field, its surface shimmering like liquid metal. Light's brilliant blues, greens, and purples cascaded across its hull, casting an otherworldly glow over the yard. Emily dropped the jar, the sound of breaking glass startling her as she stumbled backward. The hum deepened, and a beam of white light shot down from the center of the craft, bathing her in its blinding intensity. Before she could scream, the world seemed to tilt. Gravity lost its hold, and Emily was lifted off her feet, her limbs flailing as the ground grew further and further away. The last thing she saw before the light consumed her was her house shrinking into the distance, the jar glinting faintly in the moonlight. When Emily came to, her head throbbed, and her body ached as if she'd been pulled apart and stitched back together. She was lying on a cold, metallic table, surrounded by towering figures. Their skin was an unsettling shade of gray, smooth and devoid of features except for their large, almond-shaped black eyes that seemed to pierce into her soul. Their long, slender fingers moved with precision as they manipulated strange, glowing tools. "Where am I?" Emily croaked, her voice hoarse and weak. She tried to move, but restraints bound her arms and legs. The beings didn't answer. Their heads tilted slightly, as if observing a curious insect, and then they continued their work. One of them approached her with a device that pulsed with a faint blue light. Emily's breathing quickened as the alien pressed it to her temple. A searing pain shot through her head, and her vision swam with colors and shapes she couldn't understand. Memories flashed before her eyes: her birthday party, her mother's smile, the fireflies. She realized with a sickening jolt that the aliens were sifting through her thoughts. "No," she screamed, struggling against the restraints. "Stop it. Please." Her plea echoed in the sterile room, but the beings remained silent, their movements mechanical and unfeeling. Tears streamed down her face as the machine probed deeper, unraveling her mind like a thread pulled from a spool. She felt exposed, violated, and utterly helpless. Days or perhaps weeks blurred together in a haze of experiments and pain. Emily was subjected to tests that defied her understanding. Strange liquids were injected into her veins, causing her body to convulse. Machines scanned her, their humming vibrations resonating deep in her bones. She overheard faint whispers in her mind, alien voices discussing her as if she were a specimen on a slide. Through the ordeal, Emily's resilience began to take shape. She stopped crying after the third or fourth experiment, her tears replaced by a quiet determination to endure. She studied her captors, noting their patterns and routines. Though she didn't understand their language, she began to discern their intentions from their movements and the tones of their whispers. One day, while being returned to her cell, Emily caught a glimpse of something outside the lab. The window revealed a sprawling view of space, a vast expanse of stars, nebulae, and distant planets. She was no longer on Earth. The realization was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. She wasn't just a prisoner, she was an alien abductee, trapped light years away from home. And yet, somewhere deep inside her, a spark ignited a quiet, flickering hope. No matter what these creatures did to her, she would find a way to survive. The clang of metal against metal was deafening. Emily stood in a dimly lit cavern, the air thick with the acrid stench of burning rock. The walls shimmered faintly with veins of an iridescent mineral, the lifeblood of the alien empire that had enslaved her. Around her, other prisoners, some humanoid, others unrecognizably alien, labored under the watchful eyes of their captors. They mined the precious material with crude tools, their bodies hunched and broken by exhaustion. Emily's hands were raw and blistered from wielding the heavy pickaxe the aliens had forced upon her. Her once vivid memories of home were fading, replaced by the bleak monotony of her existence on the asteroid mine. But even as her body weakened, her mind remained sharp. She observed everything: the patterns of the guards, the layout of the cavern, the flicker of malfunctioning security drones. Her cell was a small, metallic cube with a single slab for a bed and a glowing blue field that served as a door. She shared the space with an alien girl named Takri, whose species resembled a humanoid cat with shimmering, golden fur. Takri was barely older than Emily but had already lived 3 years of enslavement. Despite her weariness, she offered Emily guidance. "They'll break you if you let them," Takri whispered one night as they huddled in their cell. Her voice was low, barely audible over the hum of the energy field. "But they fear us, too. That's why they chain us, why they monitor us so closely. They know what we're capable of." "What can I do?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "I'm just a kid." Takri's golden eyes glinted in the dim light. "You're not just anything. You're here, which means you've already survived more than most. Don't forget that." The days stretched on, each one blending into the next. The guards, towering creatures clad in metallic exoskeletons, barked orders in their guttural language, their gestures universal in their meaning: work faster. Any prisoner who faltered was punished, their screams echoing through the mines. Emily learned to endure. She dug, carried, and obeyed, but all the while, she watched and listened. She began to understand bits of the guards' language, their patterns of movement, their moments of distraction. She noticed how the other prisoners avoided certain tunnels' collapsed shafts that still contained traces of the dangerous mineral. She stored these observations away, waiting for the right moment. Her opportunity came in the form of an unlikely ally. One evening, as Emily returned to her cell, she found herself face to face with an ancient alien prisoner. His skin was a deep, mottled blue, and his eyes glowed faintly with a golden hue. He introduced himself as Kvarn, a former scholar from a once thriving civilization that had been crushed by the same aliens who now enslaved them. "I've been watching you," Kvarn said in a voice that was both gentle and commanding. "You're different. Stronger than you realize." Emily frowned. "I don't feel strong. I feel broken." Kvarn's lips curved into a faint smile. "Strength isn't just in the body, child. It's in the mind, in the will to endure and resist." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I can teach you how to fight back. But it won't be easy." "What do you mean?" Emily asked, her heart pounding. Kvarn revealed a small, makeshift bow and a handful of crude arrows hidden beneath his tattered robe. "This," he said, holding up the weapon, "is an ancient art, long forgotten by my people and unknown to our captors. It's silent, deadly, and perfect for someone like you." Emily's eyes widened. "A bow? Like archery?" Kvarn nodded. "The aliens rely on their technology. They underestimate the power of simplicity. If you learn this, you'll have a weapon they won't see coming." Over the next few weeks, Kvarn trained Emily in secret. They practiced in the shadows of abandoned tunnels, using scrap materials to craft more arrows. Emily's arms ached from drawing the bowstring, and her fingers bled from fletching the crude arrows, but she refused to give up. She discovered a strange satisfaction in the rhythm of the training, in the quiet focus it required. Kvarn taught her more than just technique. He showed her how to listen to the echoes in the tunnels, how to move without making a sound, how to track the guards without being seen. Emily absorbed everything, her determination fueled by the thought of escape. One day, after landing an arrow squarely in the center of a target, Kvarn rested a hand on her shoulder. "You're ready," he said, his golden eyes filled with pride. "But remember, a weapon is only as strong as the hand that wields it. Use it wisely." Emily nodded, clutching the bow tightly. For the first time since her capture, she felt something other than fear or despair. She felt a spark of hope. The cavern buzzed with subdued tension. Emily stood at the edge of a darkened tunnel, her makeshift bow slung over her shoulder and a quiver of crude arrows strapped to her back. Around her, a small group of prisoners, each handpicked for their strength, courage, or cunning, waited in silence. Their eyes gleamed with a mix of fear and determination. Among them were Takri, her feline-like agility a key advantage, and Kvarn, whose knowledge of the mine's layout made him an invaluable leader. "We strike during the power shift," Kvarn whispered, pointing to a holographic map he had etched into the dirt with a piece of scrap metal. The map showed the mine's central power hub, a heavily guarded area that controlled the energy fields keeping the prisoners contained. "The guards will be at their weakest during the transition. If we can disable the hub, the entire system will go offline." "What about reinforcements?" Takri asked, her tail flicking nervously. "They'll come," Kvarn admitted. "But if we act quickly, we can use the chaos to commandeer a ship. The docking bay is only 2 levels above the hub." Emily swallowed hard, her palms slick with sweat. "And what if we fail?" Kvarn's golden eyes met hers, calm and resolute. "Then we die fighting, free in spirit if not in body." The hours dragged as they waited for the right moment. Emily's mind raced, replaying her training in the plan over and over. Her fingers brushed the smooth, polished wood of her bow, a lifeline in the chaos to come. She thought of Earth, her family, the fireflies she used to chase. She thought of what the aliens had taken from her and what she had become. When the power shift began, the lights in the mine flickered, casting eerie shadows across the cavern walls. The guards, momentarily distracted by the transition, shifted their focus to the control panels scattered throughout the facility. It was the opening they needed. "Go," Kvarn hissed. Emily moved with practiced precision, her heart pounding in her ears. She knocked an arrow, her movements fluid and silent, and crept toward the nearest guard. With a deep breath, she pulled the string back and released. The arrow flew true, striking the guard's exposed neck. The alien crumpled soundlessly to the ground, its weapon clattering against the rocks. The group fanned out, taking down guards and disabling surveillance drones. Takri leapt from shadow to shadow, her claws slashing through armor. Kvarn moved methodically, dismantling control panels and planting small explosives he had crafted from stolen components. Emily stayed close to the group's center, her bow an extension of herself as she covered their advance. The power hub was a massive chamber, its walls lined with glowing conduits that pulsed with a rhythmic hum. At its center stood the main reactor, a towering structure of spinning energy cores and conduits. Guards swarmed the area, their exoskeletons reflecting the reactor's eerie light. Kvarn gestured to Emily. "The controls are up there," he said, pointing to a platform high above the reactor. "If we can overload the system, the entire mine will go dark." "I'll go," Emily said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "I'm the smallest. I can move faster." Kvarn hesitated but nodded. "Be swift. We'll hold them off." Emily darted toward the platform, her movements swift and deliberate. Arrows flew from her bow as she climbed, each shot finding its mark. The guards scrambled to respond, but the chaos of the rebellion spread like wildfire. Explosions rocked the chamber as Kvarn's charges detonated, plunging parts of the mine into darkness. When Emily reached the control panel, she hesitated. The console was a bewildering array of alien symbols and glowing buttons. Her training hadn't prepared her for this, but her instincts took over. She pressed the largest, most prominent button, and the reactor's hum turned into a deafening roar. The room shook violently as the reactor began to overload. Lights flickered, and the guards shouted in their guttural language, their panic evident. Emily turned and slid down a cable, landing hard beside Kvarn and Takri. "It's done," she shouted over the cacophony. The group raced toward the docking bay, the mine collapsing around them. Prisoners poured from their cells, their cries of liberation echoing through the tunnels. The guards, overwhelmed and disorganized, could do little to stop the onslaught. When they reached the docking bay, Emily's breath caught. A sleek, alien spacecraft sat in the center of the hangar, its engines idling as if beckoning them. Guards surrounded the ship, their weapons raised, but the rebels pressed on. Emily's arrows flew, joined by Takri's swift strikes and Kvarn's improvised explosives. The battle was fierce, and their losses were heavy, but the group reached the ship. Emily, panting and bloodied, climbed into the pilot's seat, her hands trembling as she stared at the alien controls. "Fly, Emily!" Kvarn shouted, fending off a guard with a stolen blade. "I don't know how," she cried. "You'll figure it out," Takri yelled, slamming the hatch shut. Emily's fingers moved instinctively, pressing buttons and pulling levers. The ship roared to life, its thrusters shaking the docking bay. As the guards fired upon them, Emily gritted her teeth and pushed the throttle forward. The ship shot out of the hangar, narrowly avoiding a collapsing tunnel. The asteroid exploded behind them, a blinding flash that illuminated the vast emptiness of space. Emily slumped back in the seat, her breath ragged, her heart pounding. They had done it. They were free. The spacecraft hummed with an alien rhythm as it sped through the vast, glittering expanse of space. Emily sat in the pilot's seat, her hands gripping the controls tightly. She stared at the swirling nebulae and distant stars, a breathtaking view that should have inspired awe. But her thoughts were elsewhere, on the friends they had lost, the battles they had fought, and the uncertain road ahead. Behind her, the survivors of the rebellion huddled in the cramped cabin. Takri lay slumped against the wall, her golden fur matted with blood, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Kvarn worked silently at a console, his hands moving deftly over alien glyphs as he navigated the ship's systems. "How bad is it?" Emily asked, her voice hoarse. Kvarn didn't look up. "The ship's hull is stable, but we've sustained significant damage to the engines. We'll need to find a safe place to land for repairs." "Safe?" Emily echoed bitterly. "I don't think anywhere in this galaxy is safe for us." Kvarn paused, his glowing eyes meeting hers. "Perhaps not. But we're alive, and that's more than we could have hoped for." The ship's sensors eventually picked up a habitable moon orbiting a gas giant. Its surface was dense with forests and towering cliffs, a stark contrast to the sterile corridors and dark caverns they had left behind. Emily guided the ship into the atmosphere, her fingers trembling as she maneuvered through turbulent winds. The landing was rough, the ship skidding across a rocky plateau before coming to a shuddering stop. Once they were sure the immediate danger had passed, the survivors disembarked. The moon's air was crisp and cool, filled with the scents of alien foliage and distant waterfalls. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Emily breathed freely, the weight of captivity lifting if only for a moment. "We'll need shelter," Kvarn said, surveying the terrain. "And we'll have to scavenge for resources to repair the ship." "I'll scout ahead," Takri offered, though her voice was weak. Emily shook her head. "No, you need rest." "I'll go." The forest was unlike anything Emily had seen before. The trees were massive, their bark glowing faintly with bioluminescent veins. Strange creatures flitted through the canopy, their cries echoing in the stillness. Emily moved cautiously, her bow in hand, her senses sharp. Though the beauty of the moon was undeniable, it did little to calm her. She knew that danger could lurk behind every shadow. Her thoughts wandered as she walked. She thought of her family back on Earth, wondering if they missed her, if they even believed she was still alive. The memory of her mother's voice, soft and soothing, brought a lump to her throat. She had changed so much since her capture. Could she ever go back to the girl she had been? A sudden rustle snapped her out of her thoughts. Emily froze, her bow drawn. A creature emerged from the underbrush, its sleek, quadrupedal body covered in scales that shimmered like oil on water. It studied her with luminous eyes, its head cocked in curiosity. Emily lowered her bow slightly, her heart pounding. The creature took a cautious step forward, its movements deliberate. She realized it wasn't hostile, it was curious, just like her. "Hey," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm not here to hurt you." The creature sniffed the air, then bounded away into the forest, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Emily let out a shaky breath and continued her journey, the encounter reminding her of the delicate balance between survival and trust in this alien world. Back at the ship, the survivors had begun to build a makeshift camp. Kvarn and a few others worked on the ship's engines, while Takri helped gather supplies despite her injuries. Emily returned with her findings, fruits that seemed edible, water from a nearby stream, and a rough map of the area. "We can survive here for a while," Emily said as they gathered around a small fire that night. The flames danced in the cool air, casting long shadows across their weary faces. "For now," Kvarn agreed. "But we can't stay forever. The aliens will come looking for us." Emily nodded, her jaw tightening. "Then we make sure we're ready." The days turned into weeks. Emily trained tirelessly, honing her skills with the bow and teaching the others what Kvarn had taught her. They built traps around the camp, practiced stealth maneuvers, and prepared for the inevitable arrival of their enemies. As they worked, Emily found herself becoming a leader, a role she never would have imagined for herself. The others looked to her for guidance, their trust a heavy but empowering burden. She grew stronger, her once blistered hands now calloused and steady, her eyes sharp with determination. One night, as they sat around the fire, Takri spoke up. "You've changed, Emily," she said, her golden eyes reflecting the flames. "You're not the same scared girl who arrived in that mine." Emily stared into the fire, her mind replaying the horrors she had endured and the battles she had fought. "None of us are the same," she said quietly. "But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it means we're ready for whatever comes next." The attack came sooner than they expected. The alien craft appeared on the horizon, its sleek silhouette cutting through the sky like a blade. Alarms sounded as the survivors scrambled to their positions. Emily stood at the forefront, her bow in hand, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. "This is our home now," she said, her voice steady. "And we're not giving it up without a fight." As the aliens descended, Emily drew her bow, the string taut and humming with potential energy. She let the first arrow fly, and it struck true. The battle for freedom had only just begun.